Ben Beard, I feel like I say this every time we talk, but it's been too long. And we talk usually because you have a new book out. First was for The South Never Plays Itself. And then we talked about The Bad Class. And sure enough, we're here to talk about Four Horses, Seven Seals, your latest book. And dare I say, the finest thing that you've ever written that I have ever read. Now, granted, I've only read these three books, but this is much in keeping with your previous work. These are autobiographies mixed with cultural criticism. And in this Four Horses, Seven Seals, very specifically, you are targeting three primary pieces of art that came out in the year 1990. We're talking about DC Comics The Sandman, Depeche Mode's album Violator, and also the Adrian Lyne film Jacob's Ladder. All three of these were very kind of oddball pieces in their genres and by their respective creators that have made some kind of a cultural splash, even though they weren't appreciated as much at the time of their release. And you mix that in with other cultural goings on, including the Christian documentary Hell's Bells, Elvis Presley's the rise and fall of his stepbrother, Rise, I guess.
Yeah.
And William Blake. I mean, it's all over the place in terms of just the premise, but it's so well thought out and coherent, and eerily so, that you would almost think all of these were pieces of fiction that you put together into a narrative that dovetailed with your own life. It's a truly remarkable work. Before we get into all of that and a review of Jacob's Ladder, how you doing, Ben?
I'm all right, Ian. Thanks for the kind words. I am proud of it. I worked really hard on it. And to hear you put it in such a cogent way, I feel like it helps me in my own thinking of it, because when I'm writing it, it's sort of, I'm grabbing a thing from over here and I'm grabbing a thing from over here. And I had a narrative, but yeah, personally, I'm doing fine. I'm not the American success story I thought I'd be, but I'm doing fine. I'm flourishing, and my family's doing great.
That's excellent. And I haven't read the other books in a while, but this one seems to be. Do you feel like this is the most personal work you've done? And if so, is it because of the main pieces of art that you chose to write about?
Well, so I wrote an essay on Hell's Bells and a Christian retreat I went to in Panama City, led by Rick Stanley, who was Elvis Presley's stepbrother. And Rick Stanley's shtick was, he was a recovering drug addict and alcoholic, but he was also Elvis's brother, in essence, brother, and had been part of the Memphis Mafia. There was a group of guys who would get Elvis pills and kind of roam around Memphis at night to help him with his various appetites. So I wrote this essay, and as I was writing it, I was like, what happened? What came out in 1990? What came out in 1990? And then Jacob's Ladder hit me, and I realized that this is a really important movie for me. And I know we'll get to the movie in a minute, but I love it. And I think it's a profound piece of filmmaking, and it was speaking in my mind anyway directly to what I was going through as a teenager with my religious my struggles with my the church and the theology that I was exposed to and that I attended. So boom, right, I have Jacob's Ladder, and I'm connecting it to this experience at this religious retreat. And then I started thinking, well, 1990 was the end of one decade and the beginning of another. So we have a liminal space, a transition. And the 80s to the 90s seems like a big thing. I mean, it's never a hard, except for September 11th, maybe, there's never a hard end of one decade, new era, right? But, and then I realized that Depeche Mode Violator came out in 1990. Which I know we'll talk about briefly. And The Sandman came out in 89, 90. And all of a sudden they were coalescing into this kind of narrative about my own life and what I've gone through. And then William Blake came in because he's the kind of I would say he's one of the big saints or inspirations for the world we live in. That everything kind of bleeds into each other. Everything bleeds into everything else, and how we use Christian, in particular in our country, Christian iconography and imagery, we misuse it a little bit, or we use it to our own, whatever we want to use it for, or we'll use the names of stuff, but we'll use it in a different way, right? And William Blake, that's like his whole thing, because he seems like he's a Christian mystic, but he's really not. He's a Gnostic, like weirdo. Anyway, so that was how William Blake entered. And I don't question, in ways good and bad, I don't question my writer self. If my writer self wants to put a bunch of William Blake in a book about Jacob's Ladder, he's going to put in a bunch of, William Blake stuff in Jacob's Ladder. So that's a long-winded answer to say, yes, this is personal. Like the Bad Class was, had little bits like interspersed, and some people that I know were saying like, hey, we want more of that. And so that was also me listening to the world, right? But I would say this is the most personal. They're all personal in a way, because I think movies, I take them personally. But this one is the most, I'm revealing the most about myself. I still am withholding a lot, but I'm revealing the most about myself, I think, in this one for sure.
And one thing I thought was fascinating, I want to kind of talk to you about process a little bit, is there are notes after every chapter, and then there are notes at the very end of the book. And some of those notes at the very end of the book, you get like really personal into some of the, your personal, get personal about the personal.
Yeah.
You get deep into things, and you even comment a couple of times, like, why am I putting this into the notes of this book? And my question is, that seems like the kind of thing where you'd get to the end of the book, you're writing that, and then it might prompt, hey, I need to go back and incorporate this, or maybe I need to rewrite the entire thing because I'm onto something. But you deliberately put it there, almost like an Easter egg for the reader who might say, oh, it's just the notes for the book, who cares? But unlike, say, more academic works where you got the little numbers for the footnotes and it's just referencing, the bibliography of whomever, these are almost like writer or director's commentaries that give greater context to what you have read or even are about to read. So tell me about that. Did you ever think, I need to go back and rework some stuff, or this is fine where it is and the people who get it will get it?
Well, both. I mean, I worked constantly. This book, because it was part of it was an essay first that I reworked and reworked and reworked. And then the book, as it was coalescing, I would tease through and work through the different pieces. I'm not necessarily a careful writer. I wouldn't think of myself that way. The notes, the first chapter, I was like, I have these other things I want to say about these little people and the work, but they're not germane to the book itself in terms of like the paragraphs and the sentences. It would have felt like a clunker to add on something about like Jane's addiction or Public Enemy, or right. So at first it was like that, and then of course, I wouldn't use the word Easter egg maybe, but yeah, I started hiding sort of personal revelations in the notes. And I've told this to you before. I think I come off as more vulnerable or damaged on the page than I am in real life. At least that's how I come off in real life. But I was enjoying tucking in kind of epiphanies and revelations into the notes that people will skip, right? Like they don't think they're real things. I don't know where I got the idea from to have those kinds of notes. I'm sure I read it in someone else's book, Chuck Klosterman or somebody, but I enjoyed that quite a bit. And also there's something, any writers listening, there's something really liberating about able to like write something that you want to say, but not having to kind of massage it into a larger string of paragraphs or a chapter, there's something, it was so satisfying to be able to, like, in 2 sentences say this, right? And so that was kind of what I was doing. But yeah, there's a few, I mean, I don't even remember. I know there's one or two kind of hard, I mean, I believe everything that I wrote, but there's a couple of hard truths for me that I kind of hide in there, because I felt like maybe it would be too grim to just throw it in the reader's face in the chapter, because the book is supposed to be fun. I mean, you know, I believe books should be fun to read.
Fun is an interesting word. I definitely enjoyed it, and it's compelling as hell. But considering some of the places it goes and the material it deals with, because you're talking Jacob's Ladder and the Sandman, right?
Right. Well, not fun. I mean, like it should unfold. It should be
Oh,
pleasurable.
You know what I mean?
the
Okay,
journey.
fine's the
Yeah,
wrong
sure.
word. Yeah.
Mhm. Um, Now, another question I have. I don't know if this is a misprint or if it's deliberate. I haven't seen anything like it. Usually, when you're reading a chapter and there's notes like the little ones or A's in it, and
Yeah.
there's a note section, an appendix. I guess I should go back to school because I'm blanking right now on those
Okay.
terms. Um, the numbers refer to the numbers in the following notes section. I didn't see that in here. It's like at the end of the chapter, you would have just like 3 pages of numbered out things that in a
Yes.
normal book would refer to something. Oh, this refers back to
No.
paragraph 3, but these are out of context. And the fact that you're shaking your head and smiling, I love it, because I'm reading it thinking, I kind of can correspond this back to sequential order, but kind of not. And it's like you were saying, it's a great excuse to just kind of put these additional bursts out there without having to worry about, now I got to structure this into another chapter.
I was trying to find some joy in the writing process, which I love writing, and I have the pathology. So if I liked it or not, it wouldn't matter. But rewriting is tedious for everybody. And this was a way for me to sort of find some like little nuggets of things and in my own mind and memories. They don't correspond directly. Sometimes they correspond more closely than others, but there's a jag near the end on like Jane's Addiction. Jane's Addiction is not in the book at all. And I even comment in there, I mean, I don't remember the words I use exactly, but I say something like, why am I writing? Why is Jane's Addiction showing up right here? Even though they were an important band for me, like in the early 90s, but like they're not really part of any thesis of the book or whatever. So yeah, they don't correspond. It's not a mistake, but it is random. I mean, I think readers should take it as they find it, right? And if they enjoy it, great. If not, skip over it, and you'll miss some personal revelations about me.
Yeah, and it's, as I get older and I read more and more things, it's harder to be surprised by something. But reading the format of Four Horses, Seven Seals, they remind me of the first time I read Trainspotting by Irvine Welsh, which was the first book of his that I had read. And when he doesn't include quotation marks when people are talking, it's very hard to find where the paragraph ends and the dialogue begins, and vice versa. It took me months to get through the first chapter of that book. I mean, I was 19, so I wasn't a huge reader at that point. But once I unlocked it, he became one of my favorite authors ever. And I love people who play with form like that.
That book in particular, because he writes in the Scottish terminology, I struggled with that. I mean, I read it when I was about 19 too. We might be about the same age. I also loved that movie. And sidebar, the kind of trilogy of my life movies kind of things, Bad Class, Four Horses, Seven Seals. I think Trainspotting is going to be the third one in my life on the like in the Twilight America, like drinking and bad behavior. Anyway.
Oh, I can't wait, because that after I saw that film, I was talking a terrible Scottish accent for like half a year. It was embarrassing. I'm glad there's no footage of it anywhere. The good old pre-internet days.
Yeah.
So I don't want to give away the entire book, but I would like you to, if you can, give kind of a highlight of why each of these 3 key works are important as far as you dovetailing them into your larger thesis. We'll start with Depeche Mode, then The Sandman, and then we'll work into Jacob's Ladder, because we are going to talk about that film. But let's start with Depeche Mode.
So Okay, great. Depeche Mode's Violator. I'm not a big Depeche Mode fan. I don't dislike them. I like them okay. Their work before Violator means very little to me. Their work after Violator, I don't have much to say about. Violator is, for them and for the time it came out, a very strange, almost hard to define album, because it's kind of dancey, it's kind of clubby, it's kind of it's very dark. It's both expansive in its sound in a weird kind of way, and very hushed and stripped down. And I don't know enough about music production to know why. The lyrics they seem to be about something personal, but they're written by a different guy than the guy who sang them. And they're, except for Personal Jesus, it's not clear what the record is about. And not only that, Policy of Truth and the sounds, Enjoy the Silence in particular, those two songs in particular, Policy of Truth is saying you should lie to your like lovers, partners, husbands, wives. Like, you'll be happier if you lie to them. And that is a very strange message for like a hit song. And then Enjoy the Silence is saying like, silence is a great thing and you should look for it because all you need is in front of you. But the song is not silent. The song is a song that you're blasting into your ears on the radio. So the work has these kind of internal contradictions. And if you look at all the records that came out around it, it doesn't really make sense coming out in 1990. It also doesn't make sense that it was a hit. Like, people loved it. I mean, it's good, it's pleasing to the ear, but it doesn't kind of sync up with the works around it. And so, especially Policy of Truth and Sound of Silence, but some of the other songs too. I had this, it's funny, here's how I got the CD. This guy I went to school with named Neil. I think he was stealing them, I don't know, but he would sell me CDs for $1. So I got like 9 Inch Nails, Pre-Hate Machine, and Depeche Mode's Violator. I got those two in particular for $1. And CDs weren't cheap.
Right.
You remember, they weren't cheap. So I got it in this kind of weird way. And anyway, I listened to it a ton, for about 5 or 6 months. I would play it. And then Policy of Truth became a big hit on the radio after I had been listening to it. But anyway, there's something haunting and both concrete and vague about it, about the songs and the sound. And once I started revisiting the lyrics, I also saw some of William Blake, the poet's influence on the writing, which the songwriter, he's in the band, he admitted as much later. And so that was where Depeche Mode's Violator, that's kind of how it came in.
There's something about that kind of transitional period, as you kind of touched on earlier, between the 80s and the 90s. There was something going on culturally and pop culturally then. It was a very strange time. I remember like Ghostbusters 2 was the trailer for that was like, it's New Year's Eve on the last decade of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
There was that movie Flashback with Kiefer Sutherland, I think, and oh my gosh, why can't I think of his name? The guy from Easy Rider, Dennis Hopper.
That's a deep cut, by the way.
Well, that's
Flashback.
Well, my dad took me to see that movie because he was like an ex-wannabe hippie, and I don't know what he was looking for, but I just remember the one line from that still pops into my head like the Triple Dent gum jingle. Dennis Hopper says to Kiefer Sutherland, "When we get out of the 80s, the 90s are going to make the 60s look like the 50s."
I remember that. I remember that line. It's funny.
But
yeah.
The point is, you're talking about the contradictions in Policy of Truth, or the amorality of that. We were still coming off of Gordon Gekko's 1980s, and where that happened with like Black Monday and all of this kind of greed is good. Where are we going into what's going to be taking us into the decade that's going to lead to the next century? Will there be a next century? You've got the fall of communism, allegedly. Everything is kind of in transition, as everything is up for grabs. So the idea that there would be all of this strange, almost like schizoid art coming into the culture because it's of the culture, it's not something I puzzle over because it seems so obvious, but I hadn't really thought about it until reading your book.
Well, in retrospect, I think it makes more sense, obviously. But in the going through it, I mean, so what you had was the end. I have a friend of mine he's like a high up in the recording industry. I want to write a book or do a podcast with him about the music from 89, 90, and a little bit of 91, which is basically like the end of hair metal and power pop and that sort of stuff. But before hip hop and grunge really hit it big, you have this sliver of very strange pop music that, and I mentioned this in one of the notes actually, but it's very odd. It's all out of favor. With a few exceptions, no one listens to any of this music anymore. Not really, right? Because grunge and hip hop, they were like two meteors that came in and kind of destroyed all the dinosaurs from before. And 80s has its own nostalgic. Tons of people still listen to like 80s music, right? And they're always looking for rediscovering new wave bands and stuff. However, like I was watching Freaky Tales last night, set in 87 in Oakland. Really pretty good film. And it's about like punk and rap, gestating in this kind of like off the beaten path city. So, but 1990, like no one would look back and be like, great music here, man. Right? Just no one would do it. It's not that it's a desert. It's just a lot of the music hasn't aged well, and it's like gone. We don't listen to that kind of music anymore. So, but Depeche Mode stays fresh to me. I mean, to my ears anyway. Violator, unlike a lot of their other work, it hasn't aged. It sounds like it could have come out yesterday or in like 1982, right? It like doesn't match up. And I agree with you in the content, the contradictions and the kind of wandering, like what's going to happen, like what comes after Reagan is, what happens in the 90s, right? What are we looking at? And this was before the internet, as you know. It was like, no one knew it existed. I mean, a few people who like loved war games and stuff, but no one knew like no one knew what it was going to become, right? Not in 1990. It just wasn't in the pop culture. I mean, maybe a few thinkers were out there, but so yeah. Anyway, the record, it's there in my memory as a kind of time capsule from the past and the future. So, like a lot of these other works.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was perhaps jumping ahead mentally to Jacob's Ladder, but one of the staples of my youth from the early 90s was the TV show Saved by the Bell. And it's a meme now, but Zach Morris had his cell phone, which is like this giant brick of a thing that looked almost like a radio out of, the Vietnam we would have seen in Jacob's Ladder. And the idea that they're going to get smaller and more convenient, and eventually we're not going to be able to live without them. To your point, no one could have foreseen that coming. I mean, the idea that we would have Star Trek communicator style devices that would connect us to anybody, anywhere, all the time in crisp, high definition. I don't think people even knew what that phrase was back then. It was a fantasy. I can only imagine the people looking back 35 years from us now, just wondering what man, they did not see coming what we have today.
Right.
I guess that's true of any generation, but they're just, and maybe this is maybe our bias because we came of age in this time, but we're looking back on it like, man, things were very different from a certain demarcation point. Even before September 11th, when you mentioned this is like the decade before, like things are getting strange and weird, and then they're going to get irreversibly strange and weird.
Well, it's funny because there was like an old New Yorker cartoon. It's not that old, but maybe 5 years ago, that my wife loves, where it's a group of people at a dinner party and it says like 1987, before the internet. and someone asks a question and everyone else at the party goes, "We may never know." And it's sort of like, it used to be that you had to resolve arguments over fact by consensus, and you could be right and the group could say you were wrong and you'd be wrong, right? So there was nothing you could do. You couldn't like crack off an encyclopedia when you're out at a bar or something. And so it really was it was profoundly different. And that's not what my book's about, and that's not what we're talking about. But yeah, for sure. You had to earn, I think Tarantino talks about this some, you had to earn your knowledge in movies or music or literature. You had to put in the hours. You couldn't look stuff up, and not really. And like a director's catalog or like all the director's movies, you couldn't look that stuff up. You had to, I mean, if you had Movie Hound or something maybe, but you had to like learn it the old fashioned way.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, to that dinner party, someone I've been talking about Scorsese, and so yeah, his first movie was Mean Streets. I'm like, yeah, it was Mean Streets. No, it was Boxcar Bertha. But
I thought it
right?
Yeah, of course. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
But we've kind of not come full circle, but the solution to that issue, if you want to call it a solution, was the internet and information at our fingertips. But now we've got a new problem where at that dinner party, the consensus could still be wrong depending on what news source they're using to look it up, unless it's something like IMDb, like what was this person's first movie? If you're talking about anything opinion related or world events, you can have 3 people on one side of the table going to one source and 4 people on the other side. And then, okay, who wins? And they all just go home angry.
It's terrifying.
Yeah. So talk about a policy of truth.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Sandman, because that was 89, but I mean, 89, 90, it's pretty much the same. Neil Gaiman, this is the title that kind of led to the Vertigo imprint in DC.
Correct.
But for the first while, it was just part of the DC universe. You've got, I think you've got Batman and Etrigan, the demon in his kind of superhero cape outfit, showing up in this otherworldly, elseworldsy kind of series. But they're dealing with very, very dark themes. There's like lots of disturbing sex and violence in the Sandman, all under this conceit of there are the endless, who are basically manifestations of ideas. You've got dream and death, not necessarily ideas, but kind of cosmic phenomena that humans must encounter on a daily basis: desire, delight, delirium, destruction. The Sandman, who represents dream, is captured by this wealthy guy back in the 17 or 1800s because he thought he was capturing death. But Sandman is imprisoned for 100 years until the old guy passes away. And when his spirit is released, he goes to recollect these objects that were stolen from him. And then that precipitates an entire 75-issue run of very strange but profoundly influential and highly literate comics written by a guy who, up until very recently, was considered a god in the space and has had a fall from grace. It's odd because, like with a lot of scandals, they blow up and then they go away, and you always wonder, well, was he found guilty of these things? Was there a case? What's the deal? How do we consider this person? Because we just don't know. But yeah, Neil Gaiman, talk about Sandman and how that kind of impacted you and led to being one of the triumvirate for your book.
So it's one of the most profound reading experiences in my life, and I read all the time. I'm a inveterate snob now. I read literature. I basically just read literature and film histories and stuff. However, I still read comics, and I've been reading comics since I was 6 years old. And I don't write about comics much, but I probably know more about comics than movies or books. I know a lot about comics, and in a way that's like, that is not bragging or humble bragging. It's just like, it's almost embarrassing how much I know about them. So, okay. So 2 disclaimers. One, I thought I watched 10 minutes of the show. I thought it was an appalling travesty. It was disgusting. It didn't trust the viewer at all with any, to me, it didn't give the viewer any trust in letting the story unfold. It kind of told you everything right up front. And I was like, well, well, if you're going to take all the mystery out of it, like, why do I want to watch your stupid show? Right. So that's disclaimer one. Disclaimer two, Neil Gaiman, who was a very important person to me. I wasn't crazy about his books, but his comics, Sandman is, again, and I'm going to get into it and why. He has been accused credibly by 4 or 5 different women of engaging in truly appalling behavior, probably illegal in 1 or 2 instances. And I say all that to say, I wrote the book before I knew that stuff was going on, because I stay out of the pop culture kind of gossip. I don't really like follow people in that way. I'm not on Twitter. I don't, but oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say there are references to him being. You don't get into specifics of it, but that he has had.
I added it in the notes, right? So okay. I had to, because
that's right.
I had to okay, it has to be dealt with a little bit, because first off, this is the weakest chapter in the book by far, because I have the most to say, weirdly, about Sandman, but the forum and the format I picked wasn't like the best way to do it. So I kind of do a glancing thing over it, because it's a very rich and complicated work. But I felt like, well, I brought him into my book, I have to address the fact that he sounds like he's a total fucking creep and asshole. So I do that. But anyway, one of the weird things is he was accused of some kind of sadomasochistic, manipulative sexual behavior, where a woman who worked for him and his wife, he would use her employer, and this is the allegations. Okay, I don't know if this is true. It sounds true, because there were other allegations that he would use her employment with him as a lever to make her do like sex stuff to him, and she'd call him master and stuff like that. It's disgusting. Yeah. It's so disturbing, because Sandman is ultimately a moral work. Anyway, hearing that though, some of the sexual relationships and kind of in the comics pop more now in my mind. And I now see that he's revealing himself in like artists reveal themselves whether they want to or not. And he's revealing himself and his predilections in Sandman, especially in the early issues, when there's some like really disturbing stuff going on. It's great, but there's a whole section. One of the books is on serial killers that are inspired by this nightmare, the Corinthian who's walking on the earth. And there's a lot of disturbing sexual power politics. And so he's revealing himself. But go ahead.
Potentially. And I don't want to make this a whole Neil Gaiman conversation, but it occurs, this is a whole other story, and I won't get into it, but I have spent time with Neil Gaiman.
Oh, okay.
Now this is 25 years ago, but it's hard to reconcile. And this is where, kind of like what we're talking about, that veil between pop culture and reality,
right?
That like you're being presented with an actor or a piece of literature or a favorite writer, and it really means so much to you and changes your life in a positive way. But then to find out that it's nothing like who they are, and it's disturbing and heartbreaking. But I sometimes wonder, especially when these allegations come out, we are coming off the end of Me Too and all this stuff, and not to say that is a discredited thing by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a matter of people coming forward with credible stories, very similar stories, and you wonder, okay, it does ask you to recontextualize what you're reading in his work. But is it possible, just possible, that people came up with stories that are credible because they sound like the kinds of things that he was writing about and accused him of these things? Sure. I don't know how much he has copped to it. And the other uncomfortable angle here is the matter of agency. Because calling someone master and doing weird sex stuff to them is, sex positive in some parts of the culture, until you look at the issue of consent. And to my mind, that's the only thing that really matters. Like the employee-employer relationship, yeah, that's inappropriate. But then again, where was that agency on the part of like, okay, I quit? Now, I understand in this particular case, there was, I think the person was staying with him, so it becomes difficult, but difficult doesn't mean impossible. It's an impossible thing to unravel. So I don't know who to believe absent any kind of court case or evidence.
So I try to, of course, right, all of that. But I know I'm like not the right person to kind of mitigate or work through or like put parameters on this sort of thing. I generally, in 2025, starting 10 years ago, I just generally believe women when they say they've been attacked or abused or mistreated. I think people in power, men in particular, but people in power are, I don't trust them implicitly, right? I don't and in this case, the story rings true, not just because of his work, but there's like multiple allegations, right? Now I've heard his response. It all came out from a podcast, which I never listened to. I don't, I don't need to listen to it. It's like an investigative thing that like blew up pop culture. I will say his response was, yeah, like we're doing like role play, sexual role play. But, the woman says that she had children, her husband was out of work. It was where she lived and where she worked, and she was scared, and that he preyed on her and took advantage of her fear. So, of course, there's a chance it's all false and made up. I don't think so. But that is neither here nor there on the Sandman, which I'm going to circle back to, because the work exists. It exists in my memory and in my life and in the lives of thousands of other people, regardless of Neil Gaiman's behavior now. And I already have it. I've already absorbed it. It's a very important part of me as a writer and me as a human. So I have to deal with it on its own terms. I don't always give the artist, like, I don't always think we have to separate them. In fact, sometimes I think it's wrong to do so, but that's in very specific instances.
But it's also it's also impossible. I mean, it becomes almost an intellectual exercise to say, I read something that I appreciated and changed my life, or whatever, and then I have this new information. So even if you go back and reread The Sandman, which I've done, a couple of times,
Me too.
Now knowing that's in your head, in order to not let that affect or cause you to notice certain things, like you said, reading especially the earlier issues, you can't get out of your head. It's more like we should separate the art from the artist, but it's very difficult to do.
Yeah, of course. I'm just saying, like, for me, The Sandman, it remains one of the most, okay. So I was 18 years old. I had a soccer scholarship and I was in Montgomery, Alabama. And I realized I'd made a number of mistakes. I should not have been at the school where I was. I was very lonely, and I had given up comics at about 16. Stupidly. Well, this was the 90s and comics weren't great for a while there, but I was, except for Vertigo. And I was kind of like, what am I going to do with myself, right? And so I went to a comic book store I was just kind of roaming around Montgomery, Alabama. And I went in and I bought one of the trade collections of Sandman. So this is 95. A Dream of You, which is weird. I bought that one. Some guy in the store was like, oh, you should start with this one. Which is weird. And I had bought a couple of Sandman comics off the news rack at like B. Dalton booksellers, but I couldn't make heads or tails of them. They were in the middle. But I had read Enigma, which was a big, no one reads it anymore, but it was a big, kind of very strange Vertigo comic that was important to me too. So anyway, I start reading Sandman. I'm 18 and I'm having an intellectual jump with college. My professors take me seriously, which had never happened before. I have professors saying, hey, you're a pretty good writer. Never happened before. And I was reinventing myself. At the time, I didn't realize it, but I was reinventing myself as like someone who's serious about school and ideas and loves literature. And anyway, Sandman was part of that. And it was really expanding my understanding of storytelling and character. And it has a hard, kind of like Pulp Fiction. It seems to be one thing. It's very violent and it's very, it doesn't seem to be moral. But Sandman has a very, very hard-won morality in multiple instances that if you read it, especially if you reread it, you start to see like, wait, he is telling us how to live. And there's there's like it's a good blueprint. It's a good blueprint. It's existential, but it's a good blueprint, right? So this is what I mean by Sandman being really important to me. And I could write a whole book on it. I'm never going to, not because of Neil Gaiman. Other people are doing that, right? But yet, and here's where I'm going to kind of pull it back to the other stuff we're talking about. It does not fit with the work around it. The comics around it were, you were hitting the big guns, literally giant guns, ridiculous musculature, anti-hero comics of Marvel, where X-Men was like devouring everything, starting right around then, maybe a little bit earlier. And you had DC's kind of, they had never quite gotten out of it, except for Batman. They weren't out of the 1950s. In essence, the characters were like trapped in amber. They weren't changing. They weren't like, and so, and the artwork across the board was not great. And so Sandman is very literate. It's very clever. It uses tons of historical allusions, both real and it'll like allude to poets. And it's about artists being lost. It's about artists writing their masterpieces that never get published. Because there's a library in Morpheus's, in Sandman's realm, that's every book that's never been published, right? It's a cool idea. And so it's such a rich and complicated work, and it's built around such a strange idea that all of these realms, like death is run by death. Death is both a woman who's very friendly and funny, and also an idea, and also a thing that everyone has to go through in the entire universe. It's such a kooky thing to even say out loud. And they're all a family, and they're dysfunctional like a regular family. And and so, I mean, I'm trying to lay it out for people who don't know Sandman. I mean, maybe everyone knows it.
Well, I would say, I don't know that everyone knows it. And if they've only watched the Netflix show, which I have not, I kind of boycotted the Netflix show because you're not going to translate the Sandman into a TV series. But I would recommend buying that first collection. The first 8 issues are, phenomenal because they contain issues 4 and 8. One in which Sandman journeys to hell.
That's a great one.
And there's the thing I love about both of those is they end on these great, dramatic, but extremely profound notes. One is about the idea of hope, even a place like hell. And the other is, I believe it's in Sandman 8, and I'm pretty sure it was death, talking about Sandman follows his sister around as she does her rounds, taking people to the afterlife. And as you mentioned, she's cool and funny and attractive and the kind of person you'd want the Grim Reaper to be,
right.
Not a scary person. But at one point, I think she has to take a child who's died in its crib.
Yes.
And the soul of the child, I might be mixing my scenes up, but I want to say it's the soul of the child is kind of speaking to death in more of an adult kind of wisdom kind of way, saying, is that it?
Is this all I get?
He said, is this all I get? And then death says, you get what everyone gets. You get a lifetime, which means you could be around for 6 months or 95 years, and it's what you do with it. That has stuck with me since I read it 30 years ago, and I'm just now getting goosebumps.
Me too. It is one of the great scenes of literature, honestly. And it's one panel, or it's 2 panels, right? And that's when that issue is when the comic really, and he says as much later, that's when he found his storytelling legs. Not that the issues before that aren't strong, but that's when he found the tone. It's like horror, life affirming, existentially questioning, dramatic, a little funny. Not that scene, but that issue, like a little funny. But you're right. You're hitting exactly. That's when I fell in love reading that first one in that issue. I was like, I can't. I mean, I used to tell everyone I knew in my life about it, and everyone would be like, comics. Like, really? But yeah.
And that's, just to briefly circle back on the Gaiman scandal. One of the things I think that we have to deal with as people is that sometimes the greatest, most profound, life-changing pieces of art are done by folks who may be monsters.
Sure.
And what is it like to be in that person's head or their soul in order to come up with something so beautiful, and yet
Right.
so to treat other people, again, allegedly, like absolute trash? It's hard to grapple with.
Yeah, I mean, I used to tell people like, yeah, Picasso is an asshole, but I'm not going to not look at Guernica, right? It's like one of the great paintings of the 20th century. Uh, but as as more and more of these, mostly men, as more of this stuff came out, I was like, I stopped saying that. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's a conundrum that could be in the comic itself, right? I don't know the answer. I do know I'm so glad I read Sandman before that I got to live through it, when I did, before all this stuff came out, because I can't imagine my writing life without it. In fact, I started writing my first novel, which only one person has read. I started writing my first novel. It's called Between Lives. Right as I was like finishing Sandman. And it's a huge, if that and Cormac, it's ridiculous. That and Cormac McCarthy, they're huge influences on this first manuscript. That's terrible. But anyway, so Sandman's like a big, it's a meteor in my own life.
Well, and I want to circle that back to Depeche Mode, because there's that song "World in My Eyes" from Violator.
Yeah.
It says, "Let me show you the world in my eyes." And when I was listening to that yesterday, I immediately in my consciousness flashed a picture of the Corinthian, who
Yeah.
is this kind of like an otherworldly creation who's got, he wears sunglasses, because when he takes the sunglasses off, he has these eerie teeth in his eye sockets. I don't know what that means cosmically, but there is something going on, and is alluded to throughout the book, but mostly in the end. I think when you talk about that story about going to the botanic gardens with your family, and
Yeah.
you see a particular flower that references something that is a theme in the book, I got chills. There's a grand story being woven here, and I think you are transcribing it, but I don't know that you're necessarily the author of it, which is very strange, because there are just so many coincidences in your life and the literature and the art you engage with. And I think that might be true for all of us if we really stop and think about the things that emerge in our lives. That it's kind of comforting in the idea that it's not necessarily all random, but also scary in the idea that, well, maybe it's not all random. What am I in for? But I think that brings us to Jacob's Ladder. Again, the guy who made Fatal Attraction,
Yeah.
and then later would make Unfaithful with
Yeah.
Diane Lane and Richard
Good
Gere.
movies, but yeah.
Yeah, but this
I know
Jacob's Ladder.
he did Flashdance, right? I mean,
Right.
it's so weird. Okay, so Jacob's Ladder, I first saw it on TV. I might have been 15 or 16. It was a little bit later. I saw it in like 92 or so. Movies used to come to TV about 2 years, depending, 2.5. And I used to sneak around, and my parents had a split, like a little apartment. They turned the garage into a little house where the TV was. Okay.
Oh,
And there was a little apartment above the garage, and there was a TV up there. And that was like my refuge, because my mom was pretty strict about what we could watch and couldn't watch. So I would sneak up there and watch horror movies on Saturday Nightmares and Friday Night Frights. I think I mentioned these before. But also, I would just kind of look for movies all the time, and you would catch like an hour, right? And the first time I saw Jacob's Ladder, I did not see the first 20 minutes. And I was enthralled, but I was like, I have no idea what's going on. And the first scene, okay, so anyone listening who has not seen Jacob's Ladder, it follows a guy who is a Vietnam vet, and he's having flashbacks to a particular terrible battle that he went through in Vietnam. But he is in a relationship in New York City. It's very grimy New York. And he's a postman, and he's starting to slip into a nightmare world where he is seeing strange, like not strange, demonic, nightmarish creatures all around him, and they're getting worse. and then he'll wake up and be like in another part of his life. Not always back in Vietnam. Sometimes he'll be in another section of his life. And there's an acceleration going on in the storytelling. And then what makes the movie profound, and I know we're going to talk about it, but what makes the movie profound is that you're not sure which of his lives is the one that he's actually living in. And so is it a fantasy? Is it a sexual fantasy? Is it a dream or a nightmare? These different lives that he's kind of like, and that's Sandman is very similar in a weird kind of way. But it's so he's losing the narrative of his own life, right? That's one of the things that's going on. And it's one of those films kind of like Soylent Green that has become a punchline because people know more about it than they do experiencing it. Because when you experience it, people are wrong. Some people who kind of throw away the ending and say, oh, they're wrong. They're misinterpreting the film. But B, going through the movie is a harrowing and profound experience.
I agree. And I'm still puzzled by it because I watched the movie once when I was 13. My dad took me to the theater to see it, and I did not understand it at all. I thought it was going to be like a cool horror movie, but it's not. There are horrific elements and sort of monsters in it, but it's not a slasher or a monster movie. It's something completely different. I watched it again for the second time ever in preparation for this show. After having read your book, which is punctuated by these not scene by scene but chunk by chunk, almost chapter by chapter breakdowns of the film. They're woven into the narrative, if you want to call it. So I read through those. I'm like, oh, I forgot about that. And then I went back and watched the movie, and bravo for doing a great synopsis and analysis of all those key moments. But also, I wasn't prepared for this movie to get its hooks into me and make me ask all these giant questions. For example, and maybe you know this, maybe I don't, or maybe that made no sense. I need more coffee.
Yeah.
At the end, when, spoiler alert for everyone who hasn't seen Jacob's Ladder, it's worth watching even if you know, quote unquote, how it ends. When he makes the decision and he wakes up on that bed, he falls asleep, goes up the stairs. He doesn't wake up, but he's on that stretcher in Vietnam and he's dead. Was the post office stuff, all of that was his body, his spirit kind of projecting that life of what would have happened after the war? Was the postman thing before he joined the war and he had a family before he went off? I kind of got mixed up in there because there are all these different lives at play here. But yeah, the idea of him having to make this choice, did he lose his son in that accident before he went off to Vietnam? Is that a complete fabrication? Because if he went to Nam when he was 19 or whatever, he would not have had that family and gone through this experience. Or is it just some big cosmic test, like God is thinking, well, if you were to survive this, here's a test. How would you make this moral decision in terms of a story? And your answer will determine where you go.
Well, so I have my own thing. I don't think the movie knows. And I fortunately have been able to correspond a little bit with Bruce Joel Rubin, who's the screenwriter. It would have been better if I could have worked that into the book, but I weirdly got in touch with him after the book came out. Very nice guy. He's old. I mean, we're not friends. Okay. We've exchanged a few emails, but I have questions for him. I did read his original screenplay, and the original screenplay had a terrible ending because Bruce Joel Rubin has his own thoughts and spirit. He wrote Ghost, and he has his own like belief and thoughts on the afterlife and stuff. But he originally was going to have Jacob leave his body and go like kind of fly through the universe and realize that there was no truth beyond a kind of mind expanding Buddhist notion of like, you have to let everything go. Right. And Adrian Lyne, this is the contradictions in the film. He was like, no, we're not doing that. Right. I love this screenplay, but we are going to get it. We're going to do better. And and I don't want to, there's a tack on like little card, a title card at the end that the producers put in, which honestly really messes up the movie because you don't need it. And it makes the movie seem like it's about something else. I'm going to let people who haven't seen it, you can experience that. It's like, it sucks. Anyway, I believe,
real quick, reading your disdain for that at the end of the book helped recontextualize that for me. 'Cause I'm like, yeah, because when I watched the film again, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But now I'm thinking, oh, this is not a political or a scientific movie. It almost tries to turn into a message movie, and it's not about that. It's about
not.
things
It's
that are
too
beyond
personal.
the human experience. Exactly.
Right. So I believe that Jacob he is experiencing multiple lives that he has not lived, and it makes them all the more tragic in a weird kind of way as he is dying. So he gets stabbed in this battle scene that you're flashing back to throughout the film. And he's like dragging himself through the night in the jungle. And, you think he makes it because the movie you're watching is he's remembering this battle. But it turns out there's a bunch of twists and turns that I won't tell you, but it turns out that he doesn't make it. He's dying. And all of the lives he's living is himself holding on to life too dearly. And all the creatures and demons and monsters that he's experiencing are trying to move him to the next plane of reality, back to Bruce Joel Rubin's beliefs that we don't die when we die, we like move on. I don't really believe that anymore. I don't know. But so that's why it's not quite a horror movie, even though it is very unsettling at times. Still, it holds power inside of it in a way that like other movies like it maybe don't, because Adrian Lyne is a very good visual director. And so I believe the film, he has not had those losses and those relationships and those stuff, because he's still in the jungle. He's like, bleeding out in a helicopter and so on. However, the movie it feels so true when he's talking to his children and those scenes, and with Elizabeth Pena when he's like having loving kind of affectionate scenes with her. It feels so true that even as I'm saying it, I don't believe it. Right? I believe the movie, because it's more than two, but it's two minds kind of like trying to merge into a story. And that's where they use Christian iconography, but this is not a Christian film, right? It's just not. Bruce Joel Rubin's a Buddhist, a very devout Buddhist. He ran an ashram and stuff. So you have these kind of conflicting ideas where they're using Christian imagery to kind of tell the story. The movie's in conflict with itself, and that's what makes it memorable.
It is. I don't know if it's specifically not a Christian film. It's kind of like, but here's the thing. No, but I mean, it's kind of like people like to credit George Romero with being very progressive in terms of Night of the Living Dead, because Dwayne Jones was, a black actor who's, the hero of the film in a time when that was just not done in the mainstream. But he said, I just liked him as an actor. That's it. I didn't write it as a progressive kind of thing. Yeah. Here, there is a way to interpret it as the battle for Jacob Singer's soul, and Jezebel, his girlfriend, Elizabeth Pena, she is doing everything she can to kind of keep him tethered to the reality where they're living together, to the point where he gets very sick and has to be submerged in the ice bath and everything, or else he's going to die. And she brings in the entire neighborhood comes in to like put ice, or the apartment, into this bathtub to keep him there. My question is, what would have happened if he had not survived? Would that have been better for him than to be stuck in this kind of a purgatory? Because at one point they're at a party and she's seen like naked or not naked, but dancing and writhing all over this kind of demon monster, these horrific visions. The one bit of salvation that he gets in this reality is to visit his chiropractor, played by Danny Aiello, who is very much sort of an angelic figure who plants in his brain the seed to how to move on, which is to essentially to let it go.
Yeah.
It's a very tender moment in a sea of grimy New York nothingness, but it's also like, I don't want to go to the doctor. I want to stay here and be with my hot girlfriend. These kind of choices, the hard choices that you have to walk in order to ascend in personal decisions, spiritual, whatever. But when he walks up those stairs at the end into the light with young Macaulay Culkin who leads him there, and then he's just dead in Vietnam, I think that it can be seen as making the right, call it a Christian choice. I don't know, but it doesn't.
Imagery,
the movie
yes.
doesn't put a stamp on it and say this is a religious, spiritual, capital S movie, but it does give you a lot to think about.
Well, Adrian Lyne, I think, would never do that. Like he's disparaged, I think, unfairly, maybe. Like he's a very good director. Okay, I don't think his body of work reflects his talent. Even though I think Unfaithful is quite good. I think Fatal Attraction, again, these movies, okay, their mores haven't necessarily aged well, but they're very good films. And visually, they're excellent. And he's good with actors, too. And Flashdance, honestly, it's kind of like an early MTV music video, but I really like that movie. It's got a zip. His adaptation of Lolita is dreadful. But anyway, still looks good. But he's a great director visually. And a great visual director should never like just preach to the audience or give it to you too easily on a plate. And that's what I mean by Jacob's Ladder being in conflict with itself. I mean, it's not necessarily a direct, I mean, it's a puzzler on purpose. And it's because, and I read Bruce Joel Rubin's autobiography, they worked and worked and worked on the script, which is weird to hear. I don't know what that looks like, but they like worked and worked and worked and worked on the script. And they never fully merged the various pieces of the script. And it's obvious when you watch the movie. But what happened, it hopefully, like my book in a way, I mean, it feels like it's on purpose. The various strands and the imagery feels like it's kind of starting to stack up and to say something, but it's not always clear what it's going to say. And that is where, like, the movie, that's why it's so important to me, I guess, right?
Well, it's also true to the human experience because we have our ideas and we have our faiths or lack of faith, but we don't have someone who's come back from the other side with a credible story that everyone can believe and say,
Right.
hey, here's what happens, because it's all kind of a mystery. And that's one of the things I appreciate so much about Jacob's Ladder. It's strange because, two questions, neither of which you can answer really, but just kind of putting them out there. If Rubin and Lyne were butting heads over the script and working on it, I mean, at one point they had to stop and make the movie. So did they say, it's good enough? Or was this something that was kind of like they were writing it as they were filming it and trying to figure it out as they went along? Because
I do know
it
the
seems
answer
like
to that
there's
question.
Okay, was there a blueprint? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so well, having read Rubin's original drafts and having read his autobiography, and then knowing Lyne insisted when he made this film that the special effects would be in the camera. He was not going to do computer generated effect. And the movie was beautiful. The monsters are incredible. But he was going to use prosthetics and camera trickery, right? Apertures and stuff, and masks. He was going to use like basic stuff. He refused to do Spielberg or whomever. He wasn't going to do it. So that eliminated some of Rubin's ideas of. Have you ever seen Brainstorm? It's a dumb movie. Rubin wrote it a long time ago, but there was a scene in Brainstorm. I'm not going to summarize Brainstorm, but. He was going to have Jacob's soul like zip through the universe and leave Earth, and it was this whole big thing. That
I
was
can just feel like with like wires and rear projection and just awfulness.
It was going to be $1 gazillion, and it was going to look terrible, and it also wasn't going to. The audience was going to be like, okay, what, right? So that limitation, and I think a lot of films, I think that film writers, film historians, and film critics dismiss technical limitations or parameters as like a driver of story. Like we don't want to like acknowledge that, but I think that's like a huge reason why movies are what they are, is that they're like, okay, well, we can't do it, so let's do it this way. But anyway, they that forced them to do a different ending, which the ending was really what they couldn't agree on. And eventually, I don't know whose idea it was, but I think it was Lyne said, let's have Gabe, his son who dies. And by the way, his death in the movie, listeners, my God, it is a punch in the gut. You know it's coming, and it's still, I cannot tell you how powerful it is. Anyway, they said his son will approach and they'll just ascend into light. That's enough. And the audience will make of it what they will. And then they, of course, go back to the Vietnam MASH, the hospital. But so that's the answer. It was a compromise due to the Lyne made a technical decision, and he was right to do it, because one of the reasons the film has aged so well is that it does not have cheesy, easily dismissed special effects.
Oh yeah, I mean it's got a period look to it that people will spend hundreds of millions of dollars trying to recreate today. It's perfect. But my second and this kind of the closing point is that vagueness. Even the filmmakers kind of wrestling with themselves. What does this mean to kind of competing different ideologies and the limitations you talked about? I still get the feeling that they thought about this. They each came at it from their own perspectives and tried to get those into the film in the most thoughtful way possible. This still works as a drama and as a kind of a spiritual or a questioning piece, as opposed to, and I don't know if you've seen this yet, but a movie like Weapons, which is the #1 movie in America and all this other stuff.
Seen it tonight.
But, okay. Just keep this in mind. I don't want to poison the well even more than I have. Right. There are a lot of ideas and concepts and things in this film that on the face of it don't make any sense. And there are contradictions aplenty. And there have been a lot of think pieces out there about what does this mean and the symbolism, all this other stuff. The writer-director has come out and said, I don't know what any of it means. I just thought it was cool. And that is why you can watch a movie. It's seemingly contradictory for me to say, well, the people behind Jacob's Ladder didn't know what they were doing necessarily. Neither did the people who made Weapons, but there's a very big distinction. I think of a lot of it is how much is considered and they made their best effort to do something profound that speaks to something greater versus, it's creepy kids. You're going to see it anyway.
They did not make this film to make a cool movie. The industry has changed in some sense, I think. And it used to be, this is a very thoughtful film and in a good way. And I think it's fun is absolutely not the right word. It's very titillating. Right. It is very enthralling. I can't think of very few films that enthrall as much as Jacob's Ladder. I really like Barbarian. So I haven't seen Weapons yet, but I will say, generally, I think horror movies in particular, they'll be like, oh yeah, this will be cool. This will be spooky, or this will unsettle audiences. Jacob's Ladder was not like that at all. I mean, every scene feels worked over in a good way, and the performances are fantastic. So, yes, there is a huge difference about a film that lasts, even for people like you and me, or me, and a movie that comes out and people watch it, but then it's no one really remembers in a few years. And Weapons, I haven't even seen it. I guarantee it. It's not going to be one of those movies. It's just not.
Well, and then there are occasions like this where you came out with a book that one of the central tenets of it is Jacob's Ladder, and it invited me to revisit something and recontextualize it, because for decades I've thought, oh, that was that kind of boring Tim Robbins horror movie. What the hell? But now, honestly, it is one of my favorite films, partially because of rewatching it, partially because of your commentary, and even this conversation. So that's the magic, I think, of you, Ben Beard, and I appreciate your autobiographical, pop cultural sensibilities pouring out onto the page in ways that seem deliberate, even if they're random, and random even if they seem deliberate, however you want to put it. So folks, pick up 4 Horses, 7 Seals. Here it is again, available at fine retailers everywhere, or just on Amazon. I don't know how this all works.
Amazon. So this book is through Amazon. And yes, I hope people buy it, and I think that they'll like it. Again, I believe books should unfold in a pleasurable way. And there are some mysteries we haven't even gotten into in the book about my childhood and about the school where I went to and the church where I attended. And hopefully people will find something, pleasurable there.
Yeah, we have to leave something for them to discover. I
Yes.
mostly wanted to get into the three big
Sure,
points.
of course.
As I kind
Yeah.
of teased at the beginning, there are 3 or 4 kind of subsections that all, lead back to this. And also there's that Botanic Gardens experience, which I think really forces you to wonder, is all of this random?
Yeah.
Towards the end. It's just a couple of sentences. It's crazy. But yeah.
Can I end on one note, actually?
Please, yes.
So, okay, I have another manuscript, and it's about COVID. It's a kind of COVID diary I kept, and I'm hoping to put it out next year. It's called Phantom Broadcasts. It's a COVID, it speaks to your point. It's about COVID. It's about evil in the movies, and there's a lot of John Carpenter in there. And like I said, I don't question, I just do what I'm doing, right? So John Carpenter, I'm rewatching his films. I'm putting my COVID diary together, and I rewatched Prince of Darkness, which is both it's a fantastic movie and a terrible movie at the same time, and they're right next to each other. And what makes Prince of Darkness so much fun for someone like me is that it is so good and so bad at exactly the same time. And I don't have time. I know we're at the end of the podcast, so I'm not going to explain why. However, in the movie, there are these recordings that the characters are hearing in their dreams, and they don't know what they are. And some people say they're from the future. Some people think they're this nightmarish creature communicating with them. Some of the characters think that these recordings are themselves in the future trying to tell them how to beat the monster, right? So there's this kind of, have you seen Prince of Darkness?
At a sleepover 35 years ago. But before you finish your point, we have, I don't know about our next show, but definitely a show we're doing next year to talk about this book and Prince of Darkness. I'm putting it out there right now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So anyway, I used to walk at COVID. I couldn't go to the gym, right? Everything's closed. So I was walking at night to try to just have something to do. My kids would be asleep, and I would have my headphones in, and it'd be like late. There'd be no one around. You'd see some like silhouette like 2 blocks away, and you'd be like, "Oh my God, is that person coming?" And it was a very, very paranoid, horrible time. America was unraveling, the world was unraveling, and I would listen to music. And I returned to DJ Shadow's Introducing, which is a kind of a classic, weird record, an amazing record. And supposedly he never got anything close to it. But I was listening to it, right? And I would like just skip the songs. I would just listen to the songs I wanted to listen to. And then all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I'm walking. I should listen to the whole thing. So I'm listening to the whole thing. I'm thinking about Phantom Broadcasts and John Carpenter and Prince of Darkness. And then I like one of the songs, I'm like, whoa, what? And I like back it up, and it samples those dream sound bites from Prince of Darkness. So, and I'm like, but I haven't seen Prince of Darkness in 25 years, right? And I haven't written about it ever. And I haven't listened to Introducing in 15 years. And here I am writing on this, and like, it's like in my ears. And then the question is, am I sending this to myself? Am I like, you know what I mean? Like am I influencing what role am I playing here, or who is communicating with me? Is it John Carpenter? Is it the universe? Is it just a random thing? It felt way too specific to be random. And so that is the kind of engine of 4 Horses, 7 Seals partially. And then some of the other stuff is like stuff that seems like a coincidence in our culture, but I don't know that it is. Anyway.
Well, there's a little bit of that in 4 Horses, 7 Seals, talking about a film and bits of it being used in a music video, and you kind of like rediscovering this as part of your the narrative you're putting together, which I'll let people discover. But I can't wait to read that book and also to revisit Prince of Darkness. But Ben Beard, where can folks find you?
Well, I have a blog that no one reads called Simone and the Silver Surfer. And I have a website, BW Beard, and which I put stuff on sometimes. The blog I do more about. No one reads it though. So if you read it, you'll be very select few. And then I am around Chicago. I'm hoping to do a few events for Four Horses. It's hard because I have a job and everything. And you can find me here next year at another podcast, I guess.
Well, that's a promise.
Yeah.
But Ben, thank you so much for hanging out and talking about this amazing book. I dare say, as I mentioned, it's the best thing that you've written that I've read. But that might be outdone by what you're coming out with next. No pressure, no
Thanks,
pressure at
Ian.
all. But anyway, folks out there, definitely pick up Ben's book. I'll have a link to Amazon down below so you can check it out. Also his blog and the other things that he mentioned. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications and all that good stuff. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much and take care. Hey everyone, Ian here. I know, long time no see. But if you like the video you just watched, feel free to subscribe to Kicking the Seat right here, and also check out the playlist and recommended video right here. Thanks for watching.